Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Nathan Law. He is one of Hong Kong's most prominent activists. He has been a leader of the pro-democracy movement since the 2014 so-called umbrella movement. He co-founded the pro-democracy Demo Sisto organization with Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow. He has been leading the opposition to a new national security law imposed by China in Hong Kong. However, he has decided to leave Hong Kong just as this national security law was adopted. Why did you decide to leave Hong Kong and go to the United Kingdom?
Well, it's important that we understand under the national security law, it is difficult for us to continue the progressive advocacy work in Hong Kong regarding international advocacy. So we need to have a voice outside Hong Kong that is recognizable for the public. So for me, having a public figure on an international level doing advocacy work is important.
Right. Obviously, I mentioned some of the well-known activists who have decided to remain in Hong Kong, like Joshua Wong. Was it a collegial decision? Did you decide that some have to stay, some have to go, or was it a personal decision because maybe you feared what could happen to you if you continue your activities in Hong Kong?
Well, it's a personal decision, but also Joshua and I, we've talked about it, we've agreed each other's decision. So I think it's important that we recognized in different fronts, the protests in Hong Kong and the international advocacy work, we need some prominent figures to play that role.
Right. I mean, isn't this a lost fight in a way? I mean, China has been able to impose this law and essentially its rule now on Hong Kong. Aren't you fearing that, you know, whatever you guys have been doing, it's not enough because China is a superpower and wants to impose its will on Hong Kong?
Well, of course, the battle between Hong Kong and China is just like David versus Goliath. But that is the reason why we need the help. We need the world to join together to form a value-bound community. The democratic value must conquer the authoritarian values, and that is the importance, the insight from Hong Kong.
Is there still hope for one country, two system mechanism, or is this now finished and has the fight to be a different one?
Well, of course, with the implementation of national security law, we witnessed the end of one country, two system. And in the international front, it's important that we stress the autonomy and democracy are what Hong Kong people deserve, and China is bound to really implement those policies to Hong Kong. So I think even though one country, two system is ended, but we also have to continuously to remind the world that China is violating that treaty, and we are fighting for what we are supposed to enjoy.
Right. Your advocacy work has included a meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, just very recently in London. We've seen the rhetoric escalate between Washington and Beijing over a number of issues. We've seen consulates being shut down. And obviously, this opens the way for the Chinese to accuse you of essentially being a U.S. puppet. What is your response?
Well, the Chinese government has been launching smear campaign, a lot of misinformation on me for years. This is not the first time. I don't have any collusion with foreign forces. I'm not receiving any funding from them. I'm just representing a large portion of Hong Kong people who are in support of our autonomy and democracy. So for me, meeting these people, meeting these politicians, including the shadow foreign secretary in the UK and the others, is to voice out for Hong Kong people and stress the demands that they cannot speak on the ground. So for me, I'm just trying to make sure that our message are being delivered in the international stage. And I'm not afraid of being smeared or being framed by the Chinese government.
Right. What was the response from Mike Pompeo? I mean, did you have the impression that he was really listening and willing to act? We've seen the U.S. and other countries take some specific, concrete steps on the issue of Hong Kong. Do you think that things are changing?
Well, I'm not supposed to review any details of the meeting, but the meeting was very constructive, very positive. And if you assess that trend from the reactions of the U.S. from recent weeks, then we'll see that there will be an escalation in terms of sanctioning, in terms of getting more policy on the ground to be more tough and assertive to China. And that phenomenon is not restricted only in the U.S., but also in UK, in Europe, or even in Japan and Five Eyes. We've also seen the trend.
Right. Obviously, you're referring to decisions by several countries, the latest being New Zealand, to suspend its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. This has been done already, of course, by the US, but also by Australia, by Britain, by Canada. This Tuesday, China responded that it would itself suspend similar agreements on assistance for criminal matters, including extradition with those countries. Are you satisfied with those steps, or are you hoping for more, including sanctions against regime dignitaries, for instance?
Well, of course, the reactions of the world really shows that the rule of law in Hong Kong is no longer getting trust from the international community. And of course, these countries not only implementing embargo and this cancellation or suspension of a treaty, but also they should also consider to really sanction the individuals who are responsible for the human rights violation in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, and to impose deterrence effect on China and the officials. So I think that kind of actions, that will be more and more in the future.
Right. But don't you fear that if there is indeed, as some describe it, a new Cold War between the US and China, this could hurt your cause?
Well, I think that kind of containment that we had in the last century is no longer existing because the world is so globalized and interconnected. But we, of course, can see in terms of the division of two values, the authoritarian values and democratic values, and there will be camps that stand for these values and really trying to hold each other accountable. And for me, it's important that if we are upholding democratic values, we are progressing the defense of democracy, that it will definitely be beneficial for Hong Kong because we are fighting for the same cause.
Right. From your impressions of how the corporate world is reacting, the general population in Hong Kong, aren't you afraid that they will make a very, I would say, realistic assessment saying, okay, we don't really have a choice. They are the new rulers. The West is sending nice messages, but our daily lives will be ruled by Beijing. And so we have essentially to put up with it.
Well, I think whenever there is repression and there is resistance, that is the motto of Hong Kong. So maybe people are realistic, but they will also resist because that is exactly because they are realistic. They understand that if they do not resist, the situation only go worse and worse, and it will not be better compared to what they have now. So definitely, people, I think, they also consider this reality, but they will continue to fight.
Right. Do you think that China is maybe too confident, or at least projecting too much confidence, because there are tensions with the U.S., of course, over Taiwan? You mentioned the Uyghur issues, there are trade tensions, there's Hong Kong, and that in a way you're thinking that China is not as strong as we presume it to be.
Well, definitely, I will not say China is confident, but they are very, very aggressive. For the past few years under the Xi's leadership, I cannot imagine a worse diplomatic measures adopted by China, and it shows how reckless they are and how unplanned they are for everything. They are messing up with India in South China Sea and in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang, in the U.S. and elsewhere, and they are really making themselves being surrounded by a lot of a lot of problems. So I think for now it's important that we understand that kind of diplomatic direction adopted by Xi is no longer working, and for them they should really self-assess and to really fix their human rights problem in order to restore the confidence and the trust of the international community.
Just as a conclusion, obviously we're heading in the last stretch of the U.S. presidential election. We've seen these tensions rise between Washington and China. Are you concerned that your cause could be the hostage of the forthcoming U.S. election?
Well, I think for both aisles, they have agreed that Hong Kong is an important issue, and to be honest, Hong Kong could be one of the very rare issues that they could reach consensus. So I don't think Hong Kong issue would be like a division or like a hostage between two parties. But I truly believe that whoever is elected as the president of the United States, then they will continue to pressure Beijing and to defend the democracy.
Nathan Law, that's all we have time for. I want to thank you very much for appearing here on the France 24 interview, and I want to thank you for watching it.